Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful afternoon and joining Women of Addith for the first in our series of Real Chefs at Work. Apologies in advance for the late email with the recipes as we had a technical glitch out of our control. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ellen Melman, and presently I am catering chair at Addith Israel. Please remember, for a little note, to put all your questions in the question and answer box, and the questions will be answered as we go along. It is now my pleasure to introduce Joan Monferretti. Chef Joan is the executive chef, and owner of 213 Kosher Food Designing, founded with her business partner, Raj Murugesu, in 2017. Joan's culinary journey began on the family farm in Manitoba, followed by formal culinary training at Red River College. After achieving her Red Seal certification, her career progressed quickly and she took on her first head chef role at the age of 21. In the years since, she has headed up kitchens in various settings, including private clubs, fine dining restaurants, and hotels. In addition, she taught various part-time culinary programs at George Brown and participated in numerous guest chef gigs. She sits on a variety of industry committees, including culinary apprenticeship advisory committees. During her career with Hyatt Hotels, she was lead chef on several projects, including the Super Bowl Friday night commissioner's party for 11 years, and chef trainer on 17 Hyatt Hotel openings. Joan was the recipient of Hyatt Hotels Chef of the Year Award twice, in 2001 and 2012, and the Ontario Hostelry Chef of the Year in 2003. Please welcome Chef Joan.
Really appreciate this opportunity and to hopefully, I may not know who you are by your face, but hopefully you're going to know who I am if you see me around at Addith. So today we've opted to work with Cornish hen and to do a risotto as well. And it seems a little contradictory to do a risotto because typically, there's butter, there's a lot of people put cream in their risotto. Absolutely not necessary. So I thought that might be a sort of an interesting thing for us to do this afternoon. If you are looking at the recipe, I am going to deviate so that we chefs, that's what we working chefs do in some ways. And I thought it'd be interesting to do two separate types of deboning of the Cornish hen. Now, Cornish hen is really pretty and really cute. And the simplest way, if you're going to prepare a Cornish hen, is probably just to do this, tie its legs together and roast it. But today I would like to show you a couple of different deboning techniques, which make it a lot easier to eat at the table. So first of all, I'm going to start by removing the part of the wing bone. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just cutting into the cartilage, not cutting into the bone. So a lot of people make the mistake of cutting into the bone, and that really does not do your knife any good. So we don't want to do this. So I'm going to first show you right now how I debone. I'm not sure that's in the way. How I debone. If we're going to do a whole, what will end up looking like a double breast of Cornish hen. And if we're going to stuff the hen, we would likely do that as well. So I'm just going to unzip him. He's face side down right now, or breast side down. And one of the, tricks we learned very early on in any sort of butchering is to do our best to keep these hands out of the way of this tool. And it's not always an easy thing to do, especially if you allow this hand, which is on the handle of the knife, to become wet. So it's really important to keep this hand dry and not use this hand to start playing around with the chicken, because now it's wet, it's going to be slippery, and the chances of your knife slipping and you getting hurt are just that much greater. So now, if you can, I'm not sure if we can see this, I've exposed the the wishbone here. So I'm just gonna, again, just cutting through a bit of cartilage and essentially following the carcass around the bird. Just gently removing the, sort of pushing more than cutting. And I don't want to cut right through that skin because for this particular version, I'd like to leave it looking quite whole. Now I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. You see how I'm using my knife to push the thigh out. Gonna find that cartilage, just cut through a bit of that cartilage, no bone, never cutting through bone. Back in the day in Winnipeg, I was moonlighting for a butcher shop. All the butchers there refused to do this. So it was a real, at the time, it was a real opportunity for me. So you see what's happened now. Because when in my heyday, I think I did 1,200 was the most I did in one run. And got pretty good at it. And that's the thing with cooking, it's all about practice, like so many things, probably like most things. Okay, so now I'm going to remove the leg bones. So again, I've just got my knife on the inside of the curve of the natural curve of the bone. You always just want to, you know, I always use, I'm right-handed, so I'm using my left hand to guide and to push away the flesh so that I can see what the heck I'm doing. And using this knife more and more as a, not only as a blade, but as a extension of my hand, really. So same thing on the other side. And just gonna remove the skin from the knuckle, go back up to the top of the thigh. Push that extra flesh around. Now I see I've left just a tiny bit of cartilage there, gonna cut that off. Nobody likes chomping into that unexpectedly. And there we go. So fully deboned. I purposely left the wing bones in. I'm gonna remove a little bit of that excess neck skin. So now, when I fold it up nice and neat, if I was stuffing it, which I'm not doing today, if I was stuffing it, we put the stuffing in here, just fold it over loosely. And away we go, it's ready to season and do whatever we want to do with it. So that's one way that I debone a Cornish hen. Second way, there's more, but I only have 2 hens today. But this might be a little more approachable. I'm still going to take these wing bones off. Just I personally don't really love looking at them on the plate. Now, in this case, I'm going to debone it in half. So I've got 2 options. I can go in from the top. So if you've ever been to a commercial production, poultry production, that they normally stand these up on sort of cones, and then they kind of work from the front. I find that I prefer to keep, well, first of all, I don't have one of those cones. So what I'm going to do is get at it from the rear. And how I'm going to do that, these, by the way, the chef's oysters, so I'm just cutting around that so we don't lose those. Now I can just pull out that backbone. I'm going to use my knife to loosen some of that. So there we go. Ready for Friday night matzo ball soup. There we go, the neck. So now I'm just going to crack the cartilage with my knife. And in this case, I do want to serve it as 2 halves. So cut it right in half. So I can do a few different things. I can leave it. With the bone in, it definitely looks like a little more generous of a portion. Cooking any meat on the bone tends to result in a more tender and juicy outcome. However, at the table, that means you're struggling with all these little rib bones. So I'm gonna take those out, because I don't want my diners to have to work too hard at this. And one of these days, we won't all just be eating at home. We might be eating in front of strangers or people we want to impress. But we don't want to use our hands to eat with. We're gonna take off the excess skin. And yeah.
Joan, I'm going to interrupt just for a moment. A couple of questions here. A couple of the questions were, where can you purchase Cornish hens? And I know for a fact that in the supermarkets, in the kosher section, they're often frozen, and you can get them at any of the mainstream stores. As well as another question was about the vegan mozzarella cheese. And many grocery stores carry that. Just have to sort of look for it. And one other question was the knife you're using. Can you use any knife, or is it a particular knife?
Let's start with the last question. So as far as the knife goes, if I were to use my paring knife, it's not that it's impossible, it's just not meant for this task. So when you look at the knives, maybe we'll just get a little bit closer. You know, this is a much longer blade. I've got quite a bit of flexibility in that blade, whereas most paring knives you don't. So that allows me, particularly working with poultry, to work around and to use the knife as more of an extension of my hand versus always just for cutting. And just the shape of the end here. This particular knife is what I use at home. My real working knife is about half as thick after years of sharpening and so forth, to make it even that much more agile, to give you a lot of agility to use the correct tool. And sorry, that's my timer that just says my oven's ready and hot. So this, it's always best to use the best tool for the job in order to avoid injury as much as possible, and to become more expedient at it and enjoy the task that you're doing. As far as where we purchase Cornish hen, so it's on a retail level, it's considered, on the most part, it's considered a seasonal thing. So something in the winter time, maybe towards the holiday season, you'll find a lot more of it. You know, we can purchase ours from our kosher suppliers year round. But going mainstream, I found these particular ones at Metro, they're not kosher, but Loblaws didn't have them because they're not in stock at this time of year. So depending on where you shop, you're just going to have to look, but they are always in the freezer section for sure. And the third question I've forgotten. Carol, can you help me with the third question? I don't remember what it was.
Sorry. It was about buying a vegan mozzarella cheese.
Oh, the mozzarella, yeah. Well, at Loblaws, it's in the where all the alternative, like vegetarian, organic stuff is in the fridge section. I think at Metro, it's right in the where all the produce and such is. They have a lot of the alternative products there. So I guess it just depends on which retailer you're going to, as to where exactly you'll find it in the store. But it's kind of, I'm not gonna say it's mainstream, but it's much easier to come by these days.
Thank you.
So now you're welcome. I've just removed the rest of that carcass. For our purposes today, I'm gonna leave this leg bone in. They're not hard to eat around, and it actually ends up making the end product look very nice. I could fancy it up a little more. Just gonna give that a tap, and then I can pull back. You know, so it just has a little bit of a cleaner finish on the thigh. You know, I'm gonna do that with this guy as well. And you know, nobody really eats this part, so it's kind of nice that it ends up in the stock pot as much as possible, rather than just ending up in the garbage. You will notice I use my French knife just because I'm using the heel of the knife. The French knife is a much more heavy duty knife, but just use the heel of the knife to give it a little tap in order to crack through that bone. And by the way, it's not true that Henkel knives, that you can't destroy a Henkel knife. You can. But it is also true that Henkel no matter where you bought it, they will replace that knife. So I've actually ruined 2 knives in my career, these knives. So this is probably my 4th one of this. One time we were just splitting hard squash, acorn squash. And suddenly an entire chunk came out and flew across the kitchen. Fortunately, nobody happened to be standing there. But sometimes these freak things happen. Okay, so now I've got my Cornish hens deboned. Today's recipe, we're doing a Dijon mustard, maple syrup, a bit of lemon juice. We're using the olive oil and seasoning. Now with the kosher poultry, we really need to be careful with the salt because it's already been washed in salt. So normally we really tone down how much salt we add to it. It's easier to add it than, of course, than take it out. So let me just grab a bowl here. Just gonna quickly put these ingredients together: the maple syrup, Dijon mustard, lemon juice, and we're going to use the olive oil to do the actual sear with. Okay, so in the interest of time today, we're not going to let this marinate for a couple of hours, like I believe we indicated in the recipe. And I should mention, before leaving the Park Hyatt, when they closed for their major renovation, fortunately Hyatt gave us the opportunity to do something really special for everybody, really, and that was we created our own cookbooks. So this particular recipe got revised a little bit to make it more kosher friendly, but this is something that one of our chefs at the hotel had actually put into our Cooking with Gas cookbook, which is basically an ode to all of us on before we all parted ways. And a lot of us never did part ways because a lot of them are still working with me today, which I'm very happy to say. Okay, so now I've got the marinade on the hen. Depending on what you have available to you, first of all, why are we searing it? Why aren't we just putting it in the oven? We can just put it in the oven. And in fact, with a style like this, I'm actually going to put that right into the oven because it's not going to hold together in order to do a sear. So that's going to go right into the oven. And then we're going to find out what the difference is between searing it first and putting it straight into the oven. Can you, is that okay over here? If I use this element? I want to make sure everybody can see what's going on here. Hang on, here we go. So using actually a blend of olive oil, a bit of canola oil. This is just to get the sear on the half chickens. I'm not going to sear these. I'm not going to sear the one that I deboned and left almost whole. Because this one, they pretty much keep their nice original shape or almost original shape without doing anything else to it. Season it before it goes in the oven. This one it's not going to get in the pan. Cornish hen is very lean. It's always fine, a little bit of oil or margarine. It's a good idea. Coarse salt. This is coarse sea salt. Helps us get a little bit slightly crispier skin. And any searing where the intent is to brown something, you always want to make sure we get it nice and hot. If you're using olive oil, your smoke point is going to happen much more quickly. So we don't want to get that burnt flavor. So we want to just keep an eye on it. I can feel the heat. You can feel the heat rising. I'm using a humongous pan just because now I can do it. I've got room in the pan to shake it around if I need to. It'll sear more quickly. If you overfill a pan, if I chose a much smaller fry pan, it might fit in there, it will end up probably getting moisture versus a good sear. And really the reason we're searing this is just so we have a nice golden brown, crispy skin at the end of it.
Chef Joan, can I ask a couple of questions about the Cornish hen? Some people are asking, can this recipe be made with chicken? Can you use boneless chicken? And can you buy deboned Cornish hen?
I've never seen deboned Cornish hen retail. That's pretty specialized stuff. And I can say butchers hate doing it. It's pretty time consuming. If you're not sure if you're hot enough, I'm just splashing a little water and you're sizzling away. Oh, starting to get some smoke going on while I'm talking. So I want to get my hand into the pan. And there we go. Sorry, I'm just gonna, because of the noise here, so wait a minute to answer that question. One of the advantages of this style of deboning is actually do the two halves. It's going to cook much more quickly. This is going to take probably another, I'm going to guesstimate another 15 to 20 minutes to cook. So in the interest of time, you know, and most of us are in a hurry anyway when we want to cook. So having it already in half is always a good thing. The next work can all be done ahead of time. So one of the things that I think a lot of people don't really realize is how much in the commercial kitchen, how much work is done in advance, because we have to. So anything that can be done ahead of time, we do. So then at service time, magically we pull out all of these ingredients and put it all together. So the hard part is already done. From the folks earlier in the day, or in some cases yesterday, depending on what's going on. And another tip when we're steering, it's very tempting to start shoving a spatula under there. Because you see, oh, it's not actually shaking. It's not. I see a part of this leg is loose, but the rest isn't loose yet. If I stick my spatula in there and try to loosen it up before it's got a nice brown on it and then golden brown on it, I'm probably going to rip the skin. So just kind of compromise the end and how it looks in the end. So we are ready to get this out of the pan. Going to add a little bit of pepper. I'm not going to add any salt on the skin side. Going to move this over here because I don't want to put my hot pan onto my surfaces over here. By the way, if you are struggling to get out of the pan, the best trick is just a quick deglaze. Plus then it's going to be easier to clean your pan, and we're going to have some pan drippings to use. Okay, so now we're ready to get that into the oven. And you see what the difference is here. Obviously, this is not going to get, I'm using the same oven, the same temperature. I'm using 375, mostly because I know that these will cook much more quickly, and lower temperature might end up sort of almost boiling them. It'll take roughly 20 minutes. I'm not sure where we are at the time. Let me see. Yeah, we're in pretty good shape. Okay. So next I'm going to put this aside. Actually, I'm going to put it in the fridge. And we're going to move on to the risotto.
Joan, just before we do that, I just want to ask you about can it be done with boneless chicken?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the question. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And if chicken is used, do you marinate it for the same length of time?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and one last question about the marinade. For people who can't eat mustard, is there anything else you would suggest as a substitute?
Oh, that's a good question. The nice thing with the mustard, I guess what I would probably be inclined to do is, we do have some lemon juice in the mixture with the maple syrup. I'm not sure if I would just eliminate, just not use the mustard. Probably, you know, you'd have to sort of play with that a little bit. I might be inclined to throw in a splash of like balsamic vinegar, just to give a slightly deeper, like a little more, like another level of flavor, rather than just the honey and or the maple syrup. But maple syrup on its own is a great flavor, and it really depends. The mustard adds that nice juxtaposition compared to the sweetness and balances it. So maybe it's just a matter of using a little less of the maple syrup and still have the lemon juice. So I think I would just eliminate the mustard.
Thank you.
Okay, so now risotto. One of the questions I do get have gotten asked in the past is what's the difference between stock and broth, and can I use broth instead of chicken stock? And first of all, the difference really comes down to added ingredients, most importantly salt. So normally broth means it's ready to eat, which means it's been seasoned, most likely has salt in it. If you're buying commercially, it most definitely has salt added to it. So if you're using it for purposes of reduction, the saltiness will intensify. And to the point where it is definitely too salty. So stock, when we make a chicken stock, we don't add any salt. We add flavoring. I mean, there's onions, there normally some garlic, celery, carrots, bay leaf, or maybe pickling spice, peppercorn, etc. But it's not. But we never put salt. So we know that if we're making a sauce by reduction, we can reduce, and then it won't get too salty because there is no salt. So for today's purposes of risotto, if you're using a broth, then don't add any salt until the very end. And because we're also using a Parmesan alternative, but if you haven't had vegan Parmesan before, it remarkably looks a lot like it. And when you open the container originally, it actually smells a lot like it. And so when you taste it, it's definitely not the same thing, but it's a pretty good substitution. All right, so what have we got here? We've got the vegan parm, we've got the garlic, got a little more olive oil, got some parsley, and some broken up margarine, hard margarine. Onions I've diced, and where'd my carrots go? Oh, there they are. And carrots. So I hope that in the recipe I kind of indicated, because carrots take longer to cook than zucchini, you know, we want to get them started before the zucchini. I'm choosing to use, this is depending, I guess, on your appetite level. We believe that as a side, this risotto recipe is good for about 4 people. We've added extra vegetables into it. Theoretically, you really don't necessarily need to have more vegetables. And then the vegetable component that I added into this recipe was the fresh cherry tomatoes that we're going to toss at the end, and toss with the extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of seasoning and chive, just to have a fresh finish on that dish, and also add some color and add that vegetable component. So where are we now? Olive oil. Want to be careful not to let this pan get too hot. I'm going to start with the onions. It's advisable not to throw garlic in initially, because garlic burns more easily than onions. And again, you don't necessarily for four portions, this is quite a large pan, brazier. But the reason I like this particular pan is because it allows me, because it's a larger surface, a larger flat surface, it allows even distribution and everything will cook a little more quickly. So in the recipe, I believe we asked for the chicken stock to be hot. Again, that just allows a little less cooking time here if our stock is already hot. Okay, so I apologize that I'm not going in the order of the recipe because I'm doing what makes most sense to me. A lot of these things depend, you know, as I'm sure everybody here cooks, how big is the dice, affects how long it's going to take to cook, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of different, I guess, adjustments as you go. To be done. That's what makes, in my opinion, cooking more fun than pastry because there's lots of tricks and tips in pastry, but I'm just going to throw the garlic in now. Pastry is more of a science. You really can't wing it. With cooking, once you understand the basic principles, lots of room for adjustment. Okay, so what do we got here? Rice. So, question about the rice. So, in the recipe that we had, we used carnaroli rice, which is considered to be a higher quality of risotto rice than arborio. But depending on where you shop, you may not find carnaroli. So arborio, you can find pretty much anywhere. So just use the arborio rice. I'm adding it now so that the rice has a chance to, I'm going to stir it so that all the rice kernels actually get coated in a little bit of oil. And unfortunately, Zoom hasn't figured out how to transmit scent or aroma, but this smells already really good. Thank you, garlic. Okay, so all of my rice is been coated, onions have been sweated, carrots are on their way to being cooked. Zucchini takes no time at all. So at this point, I'm going to add my dry white wine. If you don't want to use wine, you don't have to. You can go straight to your chicken stock or broth. But again, wine just is one of those things that just adds one more layer of flavor at the end. So basically, the white wine is deglazing the pan, and the rice almost immediately starts soaking up any liquid. It is quite important, though, to allow the wine to cook before you start adding the other liquid, because we're cooking out the alcohol. So if you don't want your kids to get drunk, I guess we should cook the wine out first. Hard to be funny when there's nobody actually here to laugh at my humor. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead with some of the chicken stock. Adding it small ladle at a time. I'm going to hold on to my zucchini until close to the end. I'd like it to retain some of that nice color. And you'll notice that I'm kind of shaking the pot while I'm stirring it, because we don't want to smash up the rice. Too vigorous with it. A wooden spoon is good, or a Teflon. spoons, a little easier on the rice, because the goal is to end up with rice, not porridge. And when we over stir and manipulate too much, that's what ends up happening. But I'm just going to turn my heat down a little bit to about medium. Oh, it went out. On. And risotto is just something you just need to be a little bit patient. There's probably more wine in that recipe that is necessary, but that's because most folks like to have a little sip and while they wait for the pot to boil. Cornish hens are looking good. Not done yet, but coming along. And I'm just waiting for the rice to absorb the majority of the liquid before adding more liquid. If you run out of chicken stock, add water. It's just a flavor thing. Can you make risotto without chicken stock? Can you do it with vegetable stock? Absolutely. But the advantage of using some sort of a stock or broth is the additional flavor. It's not just, you know, steamed rice. Any questions while we're sort of waiting for the watch pot that never boils?
Of course, there's questions. People are really into this. It sounds so delicious. Some technical things. When you put the Cornish hen in the oven, is it the middle shelf or the lower shelf?
I'm using a convection oven, so it doesn't really matter. If you're using a regular bake setting, a regular big oven, then bottom's always better for having. In regular ovens, it tends to be closer to the actual heat. So, and one of the things that is common we all forget about, because we don't really love bending over, is that if we push it further back in the oven, so my oven, you know, my rack, I'm not sure you can get that slide down, but we all tend to put stuff in the front of the oven because then it's easier to get at afterwards. But the reality is, because we're opening doors and such, that the oven will never be as hot at the front as it is at the rear. So if there's room to push it back further, it's always a good idea.
And what would be the temperature and time in a regular oven, not in a convection oven?
So I got this at 375 on convection. I'm going to assume that we're going to do like the half hens versus the whole hen. On a regular, I did it up to 400, and I find that most people, actually my brother-in-law one time was watching me cook, and then he suddenly says, "Oh, now I understand what's the difference with commercial chefs versus like whatever most people do at home. You almost burn everything." It's like, what? And giving it some thought and taking it wasn't criticism, it was a note, and it's like, you know what, yeah, because that's where all the taste is. So I deglaze, you know, we didn't do a sauce today. Most of us don't have, you know, chicken jus laying around, or maybe have the time or the inclination to actually make a separate sauce. But because I did the searing in here, not in the recipe, but I'm going to be able to use a little bit of pan sauce from the drippings that I almost burnt, but didn't, excuse me. Okay, so you can see we're getting, I can feel with my spoon, you know, it's still, the rice is still crunchy. Probably getting close to halfway there. I'm going to add my zucchini now. And again, because we we don't really know how much salt we need, so we're gonna just wait until the end and then add salt according to our own, and pepper to our own taste. Okay, got more, needs more liquid. And the reason we're adding liquid bit by bit by bit, it's a couple of different reasons. But one of the reasons is that allows us to really control how much liquid, therefore that we don't overcook the rice. It also allows the rice, you end up with a less porridgey, you know, risotto shouldn't eat like porridge. It should eat like a nice, beautiful, creamy rice. I don't know how to best describe it. But when somebody, and it needs to be eaten as soon as it's ready, because if it sits there, obviously the rice is going to continue to absorb more liquid, and therefore become more and more cooked and more like mushy like or porridge like, and we want to avoid that. I'm going to give it another little splash here. While that's happening, the last part of the recipe is the garnish. I think that's, you know, what we do at the end is every bit as important, if not more. This is just cherry tomatoes cut in half, extra virgin olive oil. I happen to be using Himalayan pink salt. This doesn't matter what kind of salt you use. Would not use the coarse salt at this point because it may not sort of melt before we actually use it. And today I actually didn't have chives. I happened to have baby spring onions and garlic growing, so I've used a combination of that. And every chance I get, I try to show off my little fish pepper mill, procured in Ottawa when I was helping open that hyatt. And we're going to have to set that aside. So, you know, we opted to use carrots and zucchini. I think with risotto, you can really use anything. I really like mushrooms and spinach. Depending on your audience, mushrooms aren't necessarily everybody's favorite thing, but lots of different ways. It just depends what's available. My zucchini in the garden is still only this big, so I was hoping that it would get a little bigger, that I was going to sacrifice a couple to the cause, but we get to stay in the garden a little longer. Now we got left here. What? And how are we doing for time? Oh, we've got about 15, 20 minutes left. Good, we're right on schedule. I'm just gonna have a look at this Cornish hen. So you see the advantage of the searing in terms of how lovely these hens look. Stuff. So how do we know when it's ready? Like with a regular chicken, they always say because we've left the bones in the thighs, this will take the longest to cook. So I'm just gonna insert the tip of my knife and give it a little squeeze. And I know you can't see that on the camera, but if the juices are running clear, then we know that this chicken, or this Cornish hen rather, has cooked enough. So let me just see. Oh no. So I'm sure the camera can capture that, but there's a little bit of juice coming out of there. So a little pink, going back in the oven. But we're close. Okay, so our risotto's coming along nicely.
Chef Joan, can I mention a couple of things? A couple of people asked about the recipe. I just want to remind them that it was included with the information for the Zoom, so it'll be in your email. And somebody else asked if they'll be able to watch the recording, and it will be available on YouTube, I believe, in a day or two. And somebody else was clarifying that the EA in the recipe meant each. Is that correct?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, when we went through the cookbook exercise at the Park Hyatt, that final cookbook, which it was amazing how much rewriting we had to do. And just when we thought it was all put back together, you know, even I thought that for today's purposes, we could you know, kind of work directly off of one of those recipes. Not really the case. And it's, you know, the more editing you do, the more you find out that, in fact, there's more editing to do. And the reality is, once we're in real life, regardless in the commercial kitchen or not, it's really, recipes are there as a strong guideline. But, you know, once you understand the basics of whatever that particular technique is, there's lots of room for variation. Okay, so not quite there, but the risotto's coming along nicely. You see it's starting to look a little, the liquid is having I guess a saucy sort of, the saucity to it. I'm just gonna have a little taste to see how we're doing. This version does need a little seasoning. I'm not quite done. I'm still not gonna add I still have the margarine and the vegan Parmesan, which is salty, and the margarine is salty or has salt. I'm not gonna get crazy with that yet. Rice is almost there. So I think our timing is working quite well. In the restaurant setting, everyone, one of these days we'll get to go back to restaurants, but risotto can be a very difficult thing. It's a simple thing, but it's also a very difficult thing because of the timing issue. So let's say that you've ordered the risotto and somebody, you know, everybody else on your table is having 5 different things. The key in the restaurant setting is like, how do we get all those 5? It's to get all those 5 plates on the pass and to your table simultaneously, because the risotto will be the first thing to not be what it should have been or what it was when it came out of the pot. So it's not as easy a thing to do as you might hope. But at home, I think it's a great thing to do because most of us can dictate to whoever our diners are when to sit down and eat. So good thing it's a relatively inexpensive thing, I guess, to prepare at home. Okay, so we're really getting down to the barrel here. I'm going to turn my temperature down even further. So we'll see now, it's still very saucy. My Cornish hen is about to come out of the oven, but I like having a little bit of seeing that extra liquid because I still have to add, and I'm not going to put it back on the heat for just a second, but I still have to add my margarine. Now, for those crazy folks among us that are actually watching fat content and what they eat, some things just really aren't great without the added fat. So you can definitely reduce the amount of fat. The difference will be, you know, flavor, somewhat texture, but even though we know it's not butter, it's margarine, it's still a thing of beauty in the pan. Okay, so I'm putting in I'm gonna use about half of this Parmesan because I like to keep it a little bit to the top of the plate. I'm not gonna add the parsley. I'm gonna sit tight. So I want to make sure my Cornish hen is done and ready to plate. So I'm not gonna even stir that anymore. I'm gonna let it sit there, melt happily away. I'm very, very low heat right now. Well, we'll just give our Cornish hen another minute or two to finish. Kind of interesting over the years too, when I think about how much food safety has changed. The okays and the not okays in the world of cooking commercially or professionally. I'll never forget the first, when I decided I wanted to pursue a career in culinary, it was before the TV shows and the media and all the, the only TV chef I saw was Sesame Street, what's his name, little Swiss guy. So I got into it like for the very simple reason that I love to cook and I figured that I could pursue a career in something that I love to do. It really wouldn't be work. And trust me, there are days when this is work, but on the most part, there's the fun of it and the satisfaction of it far outweigh the work. So we had our school taking us to community college, River Community College, when we were in grade 10, I think it was, to sort of as a field trip. And I said, okay, well, everyone was going to wherever they were going. I said, I'm gonna go check out the cooking labs. And I'll still remember to this day how exactly what it looked like and what it smelled like. And it was at the end of the season. So they weren't actually working in there at that point. It had been cleaned down for the summer. But that combination of the smell of what I now realize is the smell of cleaning, the smell at that time of bleach, and the smell of the grease, really, from the exhaust hoods. That smell never really ever leaves completely a commercial kitchen. And it was that smell, though, as weird as it sounds, that that really, I realized this is it. I'm home.
Chef Joan, can I ask the last couple of questions?
Sure.
The recipe says 8 zucchini. Is that whole zucchini?
Okay, you know what? Again, another editing thing. The original recipe was intended to be chateau style zucchini, so those would have been the pieces of chateau zucchini, which I had missed when I was rewriting this recipe for today. So really, you need one zucchini, like one medium zucchini.
And what if you can't use maple syrup or sugar because of the sugar?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing with Cornish hen, I mean, if sugar is absolutely out, then I would just do whatever seasoning blend. Lemon juice in general is just such a great thing, but lemon zest. And I know a lot of the commercial spices, sometimes you gotta really be careful with like what ingredients are actually in those. But lemon zest, fresh parsley, thyme. Maybe you want to mix it all up in the Cuisinart and do like a paste, just add a little bit of garlic and olive oil and make it into a paste that you can rub on. Would be very delicious. It would be different than what we're doing, but it would be very, very good.
Sounds good. What about using a digital thermometer and waiting till it went up to 165 Fahrenheit?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but that's just crazy talk. That's the safest way to know that you actually have cooked your poultry enough. Sorry, I'm just going to say that this is, we don't want to cook it any more than this right there. See, there's still like a little bit of sauce sort of oozing out of the rice. We're there. Yes, back to the health guidelines. So I believe it's 170 that you're supposed to get poultry to. It's very dry, and it's very, especially with breast meat. With leg meat, you can do it. So the juices running clear are my rule of thumb for having properly cooked chicken that still has a level of tenderness to it. From a food safety point of view, you're manufacturing or whatever, you got to take it up to the temperature. So if you choose to use a digital thermometer, I mean, that's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. But just know that when you get to whatever the guideline is for being properly cooked, is going to be very cooked. Okay, so here we are. And where did I put my spoons? Here we go. Okay. By the way, I didn't mention, I cheated a little. I didn't really cheat, but I really like to use the parchment paper, the silicone parchment paper, when I can, especially if I'm doing my own pots, because it just means it's going to be a lot easier to clean. And especially in this case, I pulled out one of my fancy pans, so I don't want to destroy the Teflon on it either. So I'm going to do a quick plate up with this. So I've added some parsley. You know what? I'm going to throw a little more parsley in there. You know, risotto isn't something that should like stand up in a mold or anything like that. You don't build height with risotto when you're plating, because if you are building height, it means it's far overcooked. In this case, I'm going to use just the one. So because risotto is as rich as it is, it's a nice accompaniment, I think, for a smaller portion of protein, because you're still going to be full. I think most people would be, even with a half a Cornish hen. Cornish hens comes in different sizes, but hang on, I'm just going to do some magic here, do a quick elevated pan sauce, and sorry, the nice thing with Cornish hens is you can portion, you can count it, you can just like with chicken breast, okay? In kosher, I find that the sizes are all over the place. There's, you don't have, I guess, because the market, the runs that they do for kosher are less, you know, they can't be specific. So when you're not buying kosher, commercially, you know, with chicken breast, we can specify, you want 4 to 5 ounce, you want 5 to 6 ounce, you want fillet in, fillet out, et cetera, et cetera. So with kosher, it's kind of like, okay, we want chicken breast and hope that what you get is going to be, you know, suitable for your purposes. So I've just got some of my pan drippings here. I'm just going to bring them quickly up to a quick simmer. I'm throwing in a little bit of my margarine. It's a super quick pan sauce, which really isn't a pan sauce, but it makes me crazy when I see all these good drippings go down the drain, or somebody has to spend a lot of time scrubbing them out of the pot. So just a nice quick, what's going to happen is the margarine and the reduction is going to add a little bit of thickness, a little bit of body to this quick sauce. If we were, you know, gotta be a little bit careful because it might be salty. And James, my cameraman, is going to find out afterwards if it is or not. So this just allows me to do a little bit of a sauce with really no extra work and all the ingredients at hand. So that's one plate up version. You know, these days in a more modern styling, lots of you know, sharing is very, very popular. It's a really nice way to dine. I'm not sure what's going to happen moving forward, if sharing is going to be a good thing, considered a good thing to do or not. But in the interest of assuming that we're doing this at home, assuming that we can share, all right, you know what? Put that right on the board. it's a slightly different take when we separate the risotto. So you have picky eaters in your crowd. You don't like the food touching. It also allows you to really enjoy the different components of the dish. You know, so maybe a separate presentation would be nice as well. Just a different look. Any questions? Because I think as far as cooking goes, oh, back to this guy.
I do have a couple questions.
Uh-huh.
One was the cooking time for a boned chicken.
Boned or deboned?
Boned. Well, it said boned, so I'm not sure if it's with the bone in or the bone out.
So a boneless chicken would really depend on the size. If you're doing it, you know, it really depends on the size. And with this guy, could probably use another 3 or 4 minutes in the oven. But because it's completely boneless, other than the wing bones, let's just have a look. Why don't we just have a look? Hang on. No, we're good. If it's boneless, it'll always take less time to cook.
Right. And one question about when you put the little bit of water in, like to sizzle before you continue cooking. Can you explain that?
Sorry, could you just say that again?
Sure. The water, when you put a little bit of the water in, like what to sizzle before you put, I guess, to test the temperature of the oil.
Oh, yes. That was just to check the temperature of the oil. Because if you wait for it to smoke, it's too hot. And so if you're not sure if it's hot enough, you know, like this element is on, normally you can feel the, you know, you don't want to touch it with your hands. Don't do that. So if you just throw in a few drops of water, it starts sizzling, you know it's hot enough. If the pan isn't hot enough when you're doing this kind of searing, what ends up happening is that your product will stick, will likely stick in the pan and just take a little more work to get it out. Now, can you use non-stick pans? Of course, but the problem with non-stick pans, if you plan to use them for things that really are more delicate, like fish, omelets, I would not recommend searing, doing this kind of searing work with in your non-stick pans, because your non-stick pans don't like high heats. In fact, when you buy them, they probably say that on the packaging, and it's you kind of ruin your pan by using high temperature. For searing, we need higher temperatures. So.
And Chef Joan, so many comments about how delicious and how excellent the demo was. And also that you made the deboning look so easy. So I think it'll take us a lot of practice to get there.
Yeah, well, you know what, I think on the most part, if you're doing Cornish hen at home, and this is probably why most people avoid it, if you do it whole, it looks really pretty. Your diners have to work a little harder to eat it, but just leave it whole. And if you're doing it whole, then like I say, I wouldn't be searing it, but I would be ideally use, instead of olive oil, use a little bit of margarine, smear a little bit of margarine on the top, so that helps you get a nicer, more even browning. And use, I would put it in at 400, and then if it's not ready yet, when you think it, like when the top's already browning, then just turn the temperature down. And it's like everything in cooking, it's a little bit about feel and touch, and you know, especially I find with the kosher, it's really hard to get really nice kosher hens. And when I'm saying really nice, I mean that the skin hasn't been torn. So when you can't, because they're coming like frozen in a packaging, you really can't see until you open up the packaging if the skin has been torn, if there is any skin left on it, etc. So by doing this half thing, it's a little more forgiving if the skin isn't perfect. And with that nice color on it, it's, you know, you can hide a lot of mistakes if you need to. Okay, well, I guess if there's no more questions or discussion points, I guess.
Wow, what can I say? Everything looks absolutely delicious. Absolutely. My mouth is watering and I can't wait to try these wonderful recipes. I guess I know what I'm going to try for Shabbat. No guarantees, I have to tell my husband. So on a personal note, Chef, I want to tell you that my family and I have enjoyed so many of your delicious items that you prepare for Shabbat and the holidays that we've had. Everything is just outstanding. And if you haven't tried, you really should. Everything's available at 213. We hope you've all enjoyed this wonderful session, and we look forward to welcoming you to our second in the series, which will be Monday, June the 7th. If you have any further questions, just let us know and we'll pass them on and get your answers from Chef Joan. As Carol mentioned, it has been recorded and you can pick it up probably in a few days through the Added Israel YouTube. And on that note, again, thanks, Joan. It's been amazing. And just, I've known you for so long and it's so wonderful to see you actually cook. So this is great. Thanks.
Thank you.